All right, y'all. So, welcome back. We're going to do 6.4, and this is called the size and distribution of cities. And so, there are, that it's not a lot for this section, but it actually is. So, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. One is called a rank size rule for population. The other is primate city, and those are going to be pretty straightforward. But the two that are important for AP, well, I mean they all are, but that have a little more depth that you're much more likely to see is this thing called Christoller's central place theory, and then the gravity model. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, in looking at the distribution of cities and the size of populations of cities, we've got two primary ones that we're going to look at. One is called the rank size rule, and so the rank size rule, and we saw this on a video the other day, is when if you look at a state or a country or however you want to define it, in some places and not a lot, and the U.S. kind of loosely follows this. It's more for developed countries, but here's the idea that the biggest city. So let's say the biggest city had 1 million people in it, and so the second biggest city will have 1 million divided by two. So take this population of the biggest city and then divide it by the place that they're in. And so the third, so this would be, somewhere around 50,000, something like that. And then the third city would be 1 million. So the big population divided by the third biggest city, and that would equal around 33,000. And so on and so forth. And so this is what they call, again, the rank size rule. There's a dominant city, and then you just kind of start going down by bits. And so you can see over here, this is, if we look at Fargo, uh, so Fargo is the biggest city here, so at 121,900 or so. And then, is Bismarck, uh, if we divide this by two, there'd be 61,000, which is not quite. So this is a little bit over, but this kind of follows this same pattern. Okay. And so again, this is what they mean by the rank size rule. Big city, then cut that population in half. You'll get the next biggest city. Cut that big city population by a third. You'll get the third biggest city. And so that's one way that population sizes play out. The other is what we call primate city. Okay, and so the primate city rule says that it's an urban area that dominates its country's economy. All right, so think about France. Paris is the big city. Nothing's even close. And so here's kind of the specific definition. It is more than twice the population of the next largest city. And so here's some examples over here. So in Europe, we've got London with 7.6 million, and then the next biggest is just 2.3. All right, Paris 9.6 million people, and then 0.8 million people in the second biggest. And so you can see Mexico City, 18.1 million people. Guadalajara is the next biggest city at 4.6, and so about a fourth the size. And so that's what they mean by primate city. And so, if we're looking at Arizona, and depending on how we classify the city, if we're looking at metropolitan areas, remember Phoenix has something like, if we look at the metropolitan area of Phoenix, they have about 5 million. The next biggest city is us at 1 million. And so we would say if we're using uh, metropolitan area population sizes, we would definitely fall in this primate city rule. Now, if we were to go back to this and we were to use just the city limits, in Arizona, the city limits of Phoenix is like 1.6 million, and then Tucson, I think it's something like 550,000, something like that. And so, but anyway, you get the idea. So primate cities, and so there's a lot of cool things about primate cities in that they have everything there. It can attract international trade, business. Everything is there. The problem though is that everything is there and not in other places. And so, these cities have an outsized influence in the entire country. And so, if you're living over here in Bordeaux, you're not going to have nearly the influence or all the stuff around that a place like Paris does. All right, now this is the big one. So this is where you have to definitely get some definitions down. So the central place theory, so Christoller's central place theory is looking at, think of this like a business model. All right. And so the idea is, where are businesses located? So if you're a business person, where would you decide to locate your business? And we've got a couple of different terms. So let's just go over the terms real quick. So by central place, settlement that makes certain types of products and services available to consumers. And so we're talking about like the market area. All right. And so each of these, let's take a look over here. Each of these is a different size city. So we have village down here, that's the bottom. You might see this like they call it a hamlet. Then a market town, so it's a little bit bigger than a town, and then like the big city. So this could be like Phoenix. This could be like Tucson. This could be, I don't know, Casa Grande, whatever. And so couple of terms here before we get started with this. So hinterland, this is kind of like, if you hear the hinterland of a place, for our purposes, it is how far the influence of a city reaches. And so if you look at a city like Phoenix, their influence is going to reach relatively far. If you look at a city like Tucson, it's going to be kind of far. If you look at a city like Prescott, up in the north, is not going to be very far. Okay, and so hinterland is simply the focus of goods and services produced, and it dominates the area. Okay, and so it's how far out does the influence go, and so these two terms are for the businesses. All right, so we've got threshold. So threshold is how many people it takes to sustain that business. Let me preview this a little bit. So look at, here's Walmart's. All right, here's a map of Walmart's. And so here's one here, here's one here. And these are neighborhood markets versus, and then some of these are the super centers. So let's find the super center. So there's a super center, there's a super center. That was just a market. Let's cross that one out. And so you can kind of see that it's like, look, okay, here's the super center here. And here's one here. And so, this is the population. So if we kind of draw a dot around this, whatever population this is in this area would be about what it is needed, the threshold that's needed to sustain that Walmart. And so, we kind of look around there, look at the population around there. And so you kind of get the sense that, how many people are needed to make this Walmart supercenter viable. All right. And then obviously we have the neighborhood markets. They're probably going to have a smaller one because now they're just competing with grocery stores. And so when we talk about threshold, that's what we mean, the number of people required to support a business. Now the range is how far people are willing to travel to get to that business. Okay. And let's kind of define this a little bit more. So when we talk about low order central place functions, those are things that you're not going to drive very far for. And so something like Walgreens, a gas station, a grocery store, you're not going to drive, 35 minutes to go to a grocery store when there's some that are closer to you. Okay. High order central place functions, it's things that are used less frequently. So think about like a car dealership. Car dealerships, would you drive 30 minutes to go buy a new car? Yes. Okay. You're not, I mean, that's going to be the closest one. But since it's such an irregular purchase, then people don't, people will definitely, it has a bigger range. Sorry. And so, and there's a lot of different things that we'll look at in just a second about that. Baseball games, football games, hospitals, things like that. So when we're looking at this, all right, so now let's take this little village. So what are some things that might be in this village? We might have a gas station. We may have, what else? A grocery store. There's not going to be a whole lot. Okay, probably not a movie theater. Now, when we get to this one, we might add a movie theater, maybe one, but not a whole lot. And so there's going to be a few more services here. And so this is just, we have a really tiny town and then the next bigger size town and then a bigger size town. And so, living here, we have most of the things that we need here in Tucson. We have, because this is a big city. But there are still a couple things outside of Tucson that we don't have. And so oftentimes we would just drive to Phoenix. We're often not driving to the smaller towns to get those things. We're driving to the bigger towns to get those things. All right. And so this would be like Phoenix, and it's going to have its range over all of this because it's going to have a couple of things that people will still drive to it for. And so these, again, all these little dots would be little tiny small towns. These are kind of bigger towns. And so, you know, if you're living in this small town, you'll drive to this little bit bigger town to go get something that you would need. Okay. If there's something a little more specialized, you might drive to that town. And if you want to go catch a, whoops, that's not right. If you want to go, you know, see a major league game of some sort, then you'll drive all the way to Phoenix. All right. And that's kind of what we're talking about. And so, again, it is this sense that, you know, if you're a business, where do you locate? And you take these couple of things into consideration, among other things for sure, the demographics of the area, the wealth of the area, stuff like that. But threshold and range, definitely two terms to be familiar with. So, you know, if we look at this map, let me see if we can erase this real quick. Oh, okay. So, you know, let's just take a look at this. So we've got Flagstaff up here. Well, let's go down here. So Eloy, Casa Grande, here's Tucson. So let's say that you're living in Globe, all right, and you need to go get something a little, you know, a little more specialized. You could go to Tucson, or you could go, you know, to Mesa or Chandler, something like that. But you know, there's going to be even smaller little places along here. You know, if you're in Payson, you're hitting Phoenix. If you're in Prescott and you need good medical care, you're going to Phoenix. Sorry. Flagstaff, we'll talk about that in just a second. But and so, you know, we've got small towns. Casa Grande's, I think it was 57,000, something like that. Florence is going to be smaller. Eloy is going to be smaller. And so, if you're living in Eloy and you need something a little more specific than Eloy has, then you're going to go to Casa Grande, and then if they don't have it, you're going to go up to Phoenix. All right. So that's the idea of central place theory. And so let's take a look. If we're talking about, you know, what's the range and the threshold, here's some of the shopping malls. So here's the Tucson Mall. I'm familiar with that one. I'm trying to get just the big malls here. So Tucson Mall, Park Place Mall. I know that's kind of a big one. I'm not sure about these others, but so let's just pretend that kind of these are the two. Foothills Mall, not sure what that is. Sizable mall. So anyway, so you know these malls are going to have more specialized stores, and so you know if you compare this with the WalMarts, you know they have a bigger range. The malls do. Sorry about that. Keep doing that. So now let's look at gas stations. You know this is a much smaller. So this is a mile. All right, a mile between these two roads here. And so these are gas stations within, you know, this is what, 3 by 1 mile, something like that. And so there's a whole lot of those. And so you don't need as many people to sustain one gas station as you do to sustain a mall. And so they're going to be packed closer together. This is along Broadway, and this isn't even all the restaurants on Broadway. So that's about a mile and a half worth of Broadway. These are all restaurants. And so obviously the threshold is very low in terms of the number of people needed to support that restaurant. And the range is going to be, it depends on the restaurant, but it's not going to be super big. The range isn't. Generally, people, when they go out to eat, are going to find places that are close to them. You know, where I am, I've got a pizza place that I like a lot, and it's really close. And, you know, the places that we go out to eat are relatively close. Okay. So, anyway, so that's what we mean by central place theory. Now, what if you need specialized hospital care? Let me clear yourself again. So this is in Arizona, designated Arizona trauma centers. And so a level 1 trauma center, that's as high level as it gets. So whatever happens to you, if somebody gets in a terrible car crash, they have life-threatening injuries, this level 1 can handle anything. Okay. And then we have the gold star here is level 1 pediatric. And then green is, excuse me, level 3, and red is level 4. And so as the levels go down, that just means that they can't handle quite as much, you know, as the level 1s. All right, so let's take, so here's a map of Arizona. And you can see we've got a level 1 trauma center there. Phoenix has, so this box here is the same down here. So you can see Phoenix has a lot of level 1, comparatively speaking, trauma centers for the state. This is where almost all of them are. And then Tucson has one. All right, and so let's say you're out in where? Here. Let's say you're here, and something happens. Actually, let's go up here to Prescott. So I lived up in this area. So if you had, if you got in a wreck and it wasn't necessarily life threatening. I mean, if you were in a wreck and it was life threatening, they send you to the hospital, but the hospital here may not be able to take care of you given the level that they're at. And so they would stabilize you and then they would put you on a flight or in an ambulance and send you down to Phoenix. Okay. And so this is the idea again of the central place theory. They're going to put stuff here that you don't often need, but this is where that high level stuff is. Alrighty. And you can see there's one children's hospital that meets level 1 pediatric. And so if there's a child with a critical case, they're going to Phoenix. Okay. And again, this is the idea of the central place theory. This is professional sports. And again, think about, how far are people willing to travel? So a gas station, not very far, McDonald's, not very far. Professional sports team, they're going to travel far. And so in Phoenix, here's all the ones that we have here in Phoenix. This is baseball. This is basketball. Phoenix Suns are doing well. NFL and then NHL. All right. And so you can see, and then I did want to point this out. So this is Green Bay up here. And this asterisk is metro areas less than 1 million people. You don't see hardly any. Here's one in Winnipeg. There's one, but there aren't a whole lot. And so these places are only going in the major populated areas because they know, if we're in Denver, if you live here, if you're a sports fan, you'll take that drive. If you're living here in Tucson, we don't have any professional sports in Tucson, but if you want to go catch a Major League Baseball game, you'll do that 2-hour drive. All right. And so those are the higher order things that people will be willing to drive to. All right. And their threshold, is going to be bigger for sure. All right. So the last thing, this is called the gravity model. So the gravity model is it's an attempt to predict the flow of either people or goods between two places. And, it's the idea of actual gravity, pin dropping kind of thing. And so, the bigger the mass of something, the more gravity it has. And so think about, when we apply this to cities, think about Phoenix. Phoenix is this huge city. And so it's going to have, a lot of this gravity that's going to draw people to it. All right. And so this is what the gravity model tries to predict. And to do this, they came up with a formula. All right, down here, it says and so they come up with this value, and the higher the value, the more flow of people between those two areas, people and other things. Okay, and so here's some of the stuff accounts for population migration, commodity flows, just flow of goods, work commutes, shopping patterns, telephone call volumes. And so it's just the interactions between those two areas. And so in order to calculate it, so we've got 3 different cities here. We'll just say city A, B, and C, how much flow is there going to be between these cities? And so the formula that they came up with is to take the population of city A, then multiply that by the population of city B, and then take the distance between them in miles or whatever and square it. Okay. And we square it because of this idea of distance decay. Because remember, the farther away you get from a place, the less influence that place has. And so by squaring the distance, that's trying to account for the concept of distance decay. Alrighty. Now, there are some problems with this model, and one is, it assumes that travel is completely easy between these two places. It's like this flat plain where there's no barriers or anything. Mountains could be here or bodies of water, stuff like that. And so it's not perfect by any stretch. And there are some other things, but it does give you a sense of how much flow there is between places. So I did this. Let me see if I can move myself real quick. So if we're looking at, just to kind of put this into use, if we're looking at 3 places like Phoenix here, Casa Grande here, and then Tucson here, and so what's the likelihood, how much flow is there going to be between Casa Grande and Phoenix, Casa Grande and Tucson, and then Tucson and Phoenix? All right. So which areas are going to have the most flow? And so in order to do this, here's the statistics. And I took the metropolitan area. So Casa Grande, about 57,000 people. its distance to Phoenix, I put over here, is 48 miles. All right. And then the distance to Tucson is 71 miles. All right. Tucson population is about 1 million. It's about 113 miles from Phoenix, and then Phoenix population is 5 million. And so, in order to do these calculations, so this is from Casa Grande to Phoenix. All right. And so 57,000 people. So population of city A times population of city B. So 57,000 times 5 million. It's like 285 billion or so over 48 squared. Remember, this is the distance, then square that. So we get this number here, this value here, 123 million and change. All right. And so again, remember, the bigger the number, the more flow there is. So that's between Casa Grande and Phoenix. Between Casa Grande and Tucson, if we do all this math, 57,000 times a million divided by 71 squared, you end up with 11,307. And so you can just look at these two numbers. You know, if you're in Casa Grande, the vast majority of people are going to be having interactions with Phoenix instead of Tucson. Now, how does Casa Grande, which is close, 71 miles away from Phoenix, compared to Tucson's 113 miles away from Phoenix, how does that compare? And so when we do the math, you can see that this number calculates out much bigger, so 319 million. And so even though Tucson is farther away, these two cities are much, much bigger in population. And so the flow of people and other stuff that we talked about is going to be greatest between Tucson and Phoenix. All right. And it just, you know, if you sit back, it makes common sense. There's 1 million people here, 5 million in Phoenix. They're going to be interacting a lot more. This is a much smaller number, just population wise. But this is a significant difference, you know, between Casa Grande and Tucson versus Tucson and Phoenix. And yeah. So what I want you to do is to check out Sedona, Flagstaff, and Phoenix. And so what are the values for those three cities? So first do, you know, let's get a value for between Sedona and Flagstaff. And those are pretty close together. All right. Then Sedona and Phoenix. And then Flagstaff and Phoenix. I have trouble spelling. All right, and just see which areas are going to have the most flow between them. All righty. And lastly, I want you to freeze this and work on this. This is a map created by linking 4 million commutes between census tracts. And so you can see, so if we look at this is just measuring commutes. You can see that, and again, this is gravity model kind of stuff. Phoenix is the big thing that's pulling everybody in. If we come over here, you know, here's San Antonio, Austin's up in this area, so there's going to be a lot of flow in between there. Here's where Dallas pulls from, you know, all these people flowing into here. And again, the bigger city acts as where the forces of gravity start to come in. Atlanta, same kind of thing. You know, here's Atlanta in the middle, and all of these flows come into Atlanta, Birmingham, Miami, you know, everybody flowing into Miami, out here in LA and San Diego. So take a second and, you know, either answer this for real or answer this in your brain. How does the gravity model reflected by commuter patterns in the United States? So that would be the question to answer for this one. Alrighty. So that's it for section 6.4. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. 24 minutes, it's not too bad. Y'all take care.